Good day, good day, good day, Matthew Hagum. I realized in watching my last video that I like to talk with my hands, so I'm going to keep my hands active because that's something I love to do. Anyways, today I wanted to go live and share a little bit about really what my day looks like, right? So for those of you who don't know, my name is Matthew Hagum. I'm the CEO and founder of 10kCreators.com. It's a social enterprise whose mission is to support artists on their journey towards financial wellness. So I basically serve as a financial strategist and business advisor for both individual artists, those are self-producing creators who are making it work through a patchwork of things, whether it's writing grants, crowdfunding, odd jobs, whether they're related or not. It's creating products, performing, et cetera, and kind of trying to make that work for them financially, or arts organizations who are doing their work, whether it's a Seattle group that I work with. It's a music group doing work to bring music education to the community whilst uprooting racism, or dance organizations like I've worked with in the past. So what I wanted to do today was kind of walk you through a day that I had, right? So you can kind of understand what it's like to work with me and kind of some of the things that come up in the conversations that I have with clients, right? So I'm not going to tell you who the exact artist is and give their name, but I'll kind of describe their artwork and then some of the things that came up in the conversation, so that you can get a sense of what I did. And of course, this is not everything I did in that day. This happens to be about this last Tuesday. Unless you're watching this later on in time and space, then it's some Tuesday in January of 2024. Anyways, because I do a lot of other things as well to support my business, but my primary focus is helping artists. So the first meeting of the day I had on Tuesday was with a visual artist. This person is a painter, a crafter, a DIY artist. They're also an arts educator. And we've been working together for now at least a year and a half. We're coming up on our second year. And this person, I love this person. They're awesome. They're based out of California. And some things that we talked about were around like the need to establish a better system for managing cash flow and budgeting. And so that starts off, as it does with many of my clients, by creating a list of bills and kind of getting clear on like, okay, what's due, when is it due, what payment method do you use, and any notes you have about that particular bill, so that we can then take that bill worksheet or that bill spreadsheet and turn it into cash flow projections. And then I teach people how I manage my cash flow. So in this case, with this artist in particular, that's something that we're working on. The other thing that we talked about was establishing accountability system, right? Sometimes it's not that the person doesn't want to do the work, but that there's like resistance there, and then it's in the landscape of things to do, it's not the priority anyway. So what we talked about was two levels of accountability. One, of course, is me. I meet with this artist every week, and now we've committed 10 to 15 minutes at the top of our meeting to check in on the cash flow and see how we're doing, and to kind of figure out what that looks like and to make sure the ball continues to roll in addressing this artist's cash flow needs as their business continues to scale. But also, in this example, leaning on their significant other. They actually came up with this term that I don't know if they came up with it or not, but it was eggs and bankin', or banking, but bankin', right? And so every Sunday they get together over brunch, this couple, and they talk about their finances and create some culture of accountability around that as well. So then we also talked about something really important, and that is her art making, right? What is she making right now? And she showed me some of the things that she's designing, and I think they're brilliant and beautiful and have a lot of business potential. And of course, my mind immediately goes to, oh, that could be this, that could be that, that could be this, right? But for her, it's about the creative process. And I think one thing that she said that I wanted to pinpoint is that in order for the business to thrive, the artist needs to be nurtured. And I underscore that. And I think one of my challenges in my conversations with artists is we sometimes have to toggle between the two parts of the brain, right? Let's talk about the art, let's talk about the creativity, and let's talk about the business. And also, P.S., you can do both in the same hour. Sometimes it's a little hard to kind of jump from the two, but it's possible. And that's a little bit about what we talked about in my first meeting that morning. Then I did some things, sent some emails, probably, you know, had some food, whatever. And then I went into my next meeting, which was with the managing director of a nonprofit. Now, the night before, we had a board meeting, and you know, we had set some things in motion that we've been working on, including reviewing cash flow projections and talking about some major financial decisions that needed to be made for the organization. And so today was, and then some other things. And so the following day, Tuesday, was about sort of debriefing on the board meeting, talking about how that went, kind of understanding like, oh, well, what could we have done better in terms of communicating about the finances and empowering the board members to take leadership responsibilities. And so then that turned into continuing to talk about the cash flow, but more specifically on what the next steps might look like for the finance committee. And a sub-bullet point of that finance committee initiative is to really look at the utilization of QuickBooks, because in this example, the client is not effectively using QuickBooks to the extent that they could be, right? And so, so we're talking about that, but then this client has a bank of hours with me to continue working through the rest of the month. So we were trying to figure out, okay, well, there's a lot of different areas that we could look at. What would you like to focus on? And so some things that we're going to be focused on going forward are, they just launched a sponsorship, corporate sponsorship program, and a monthly giving campaign. And so the focus is going to be, how do we keep the momentum going around those initiatives, and in particular prepare for a really big ask of upwards of $18,000 for the end of year sponsorship, as well as achieving the monthly giving goals that we have for the organization. This organization also has some bylaws that need a review, particularly from the lens of culture, right? I know you're like, well, why is a financial strategist, money person talking about bylaws and culture? Well, it makes sense if you understand that organizations are a system, right? And in order to achieve, in this example, we're also talking about non-hierarchical compensation structures for how people get brought into the organization and then address their compensation needs. And anyways, long story short, we want to make sure that some of the cultural elements of who this organization is and what they stand for around equity is expressed effectively in the culture of the words in the bylaws that then can ultimately translate to the governance of the organization, so that the way that we are with each other and with our other stakeholders and with money is all in harmony and synchronicity. And anyways, that's a whole other point. But right, and then also preparing the organization to pitch for new board members, because board members increase capacity, and we need to figure out, okay, how do we bring new talent onto the board? Right, so that was my conversation with the managing director at the nonprofit. Then I probably did some other things. And then I had a meeting with a dance artist and educator. This is a person launching a somatics-based coaching business. And, you know, we're starting at the ground floor. I think first and foremost, figuring out, you know, who the ideal customer is and really understanding what that customer's needs are. And then figuring out how to build a brand around that, creating a name for the organization, establishing an effective marketing and sales strategy to attract that customer and bring them in through the website into taking action, like signing up for a coaching call, or if not that, giving their email to sign up for some content, some thought leadership content, and kind of move this person into more of a long-term nurturing relationship as a prospective customer, right? And also really just being clear about, like, what is the customer acquisition process? So when somebody says yes to you, right, what do you do with them? What conversations do you have? What are the steps in that process like? And ultimately, for this person in particular, developing some really strong, compelling educational content that they can put out on TikTok and any other social media platform that they choose to use to talk about their work, right? And so after that meeting was over, I then moved into my next meeting right away. So it was back-to-backs. So I think that dance artist actually also happens to be California, and this next client also happens to be in California. So I met with 3 California clients, 1 Seattle client. It was a busy day. And then 1 local client to my area. Anyways, I'll get to that person. So then the LA-based performance artist, musician, costume designer, and that was a really interesting conversation. I've been working with this client for now a solid 2 years. she was one of my first clients when I started the business. So P.S. if you're interested in working with me, a lot of my relationships, I'm committed to the long haul. We're in it to win it. We're going to be thick and thin, through highs and lows in the cash flow, getting that business off the ground, making it work, because I want you to achieve your bigger picture. So I'm in it to win it. So if you become a client and you stay a client and we have a great relationship, it's for life, honey, hopefully. Anyways, point being, back to client. So we started talking about, of all things, dating and relationships. And you might be like, well, why are you talking about dating with your clients? You're not a relationship coach. You're not a expert in dating. I mean, I have my own experiences, which I won't get into. But the point is this. This artist had indicated a sentiment to the likes of, no more sacrificing other areas of my life for my art, because it's about finding balance. And I think that's something I want to ultimately highlight here too, because the truth is when you think about the work that I do with my clients, yeah, it's about money, it's about making money, it's about how do we improve how you make and manage money, and that's a lot of business stuff, and that's a lot of, that could turn into spreadsheets and QuickBooks files and just business models and all the technical stuff that goes into, achieving that financial goal. But then it starts to tip into the personal life, right? It's not just about how your business is performing. It's about, are you nurturing yourself, taking care of yourself? Are you putting money into the budget to tend to your personal needs as much as your professional needs? And then that brings up the question, well, what are your personal needs? What is the bigger picture here, right? And that's part of what I do, right, is I think one of my skill sets is being able to sort of see the bigger picture and to be able, and then connect the dots and be like, oh, well, you realize that this thing you're saying over here is actually directly correlated to this thing, and if you address this thing, then that might shift and then create some space for this other thing to kind of come into your life, right? And look, your dating life is your dating life, and it does impact your work as an artist, because it impacts who you are and how you find balance. And so part of this journey is towards financial wellness is finding balance in one's life as an artist, so that you're not heavily on one side or the other in terms of how you show up in the world, right? And that looks different for everybody, and it's not for me to say what it is for you, but for me to create some opportunity for you to ask the questions. Anyways, so then of course we started talking about some art making and how this stuff around the relationship is working its way into the music that this artist is making, because I do care about the art making as much as I care about the business making. And so then from there, that kind of opened up a conversation about, okay, well, how do we, while you're in this space of incubation, how do we keep people aware that you're making this art, right? How do you show up, in fact, on social media so that you don't do what some artists do, which is, run into the art cave, hide for however many days, weeks, months, make the art, and then run out to the cave, out of the cave in the front of the cave, and be like, look, everyone, I have art, and I want to sell it. And then there's nobody there, and because they're like off doing other things, and you're like, okay, well, shoot, I should have at least come out every day and said, hey, everyone, just letting you know, here's where I'm at, whatever. Point is that you got to keep doing audience development and relationship building, which, P.S., I have a workshop coming up on February 7th about that, with Claire Jones, which I'll post in the story or drop it wherever it needs to drop. But anyways, you got to keep doing that work. And so we talked about that. And then, of course, again, same thing. We talked about cash flow projections for 2024 and creating that bill spreadsheet so that we can understand what the runway looks like for the next 6 months. Because again, same thing, like if you, as with irregular income or as an artist, which is often the case, you got to know, like, okay, do I have 3 months to bring in this money? Do I have 6 months to bring in this money? It's going to change what your focus is and what your priorities are as an artist and what you choose to make. And it's not that you don't get to make your work because of the circumstances. You get to choose what work is ready to be nurtured at this time based on where you're at financially, right? And then this artist in particular works with contractors and engages other people, so we just started talking about scouting for the right resources and talent as a form of relationship building, because you don't want to hire somebody to work on something that you don't really know. You got to build trust with people, and that takes time. So then my last meeting of the day was with a muralist and a graffiti artist. And this person is becoming a client, and so I'm really excited about that. He's awesome. I love what he does. And I've spent a couple of phone calls just getting to know who he is, and I happen to have bought some of his art in the past. So, so that's part of what I like to do. I like to get to know people before we say yes, right? But anyways, so this person is going to get started next week, and he had a couple of really critical questions for me that I wanted to share with you. Because I think they're important questions to answer, right? And so one of those questions was, well, Matthew, I'm a graffiti artist and a muralist in this case, and you're not that, and you don't have a lot of experience in that area. So how could you help me if that's the case, right? And it's a good question, and the truth is. You will most likely know your art industry and your art practice probably better than I will, right? Because look, I'm not in this case, I'm not a mural artist. I've never painted on a wall and gone through the production process of what that means and how you have to relate to people. But there are a lot of similar questions that you have to ask yourself about how that happens, right? And there's a lot of research that needs to get done, and so research in and of itself is a skill set. It's something I often do with my clients to say, okay, well, if that's your goal, let's figure out how to do that, and do the research. And I can help with the research, and I'm really quick at doing research with my clients to find the answers that we need. And there's also, whether you're producing a mural on a wall or a painting, a commissioned painting, or a dance performance, there are production questions that need to get asked that are very straightforward. Like, what is the goal of the project? What is the budget for the project? How are we going to raise money for it? What marketing and sales tactics are we going to need to leverage to make this occur? Who do we need to get on the team? What's the timeline for this thing? What are the resources that we have? What are the resources that we don't have? How do we get those resources, right? And how do we utilize this opportunity to launch us off into our next project? Well, what is our next project? Again, same set of questions around that project. Okay, great. Well, you've got you got this project for today. You've got that project for tomorrow. Your vision. What is your vision? Let's talk about your vision and how that translates to your business model. Okay, great. We see the vision, but let's rewind for a second and go back to where you're at. Now, tell me about where you're at financially. Right? We talked about your vision as an artist and how that could be entrepreneurialized into a business. I think, is that a new word I just heard? Entrepreneurialized into a business. Let's talk about your cash flow, your current financial position right now today, right? And this is where I go back to that comment about dating. I explained this. I was like, look, the reason why I have conversations about relationship stuff and personal life and with my clients is because those impact our current day finances. And we, if you work with 10K creators, need to build trust with each other in order to go that deep on certain things. And because, look, I'm going to show you, it's like I said to one of my clients that same day, I was like, I'll show you my spreadsheet if you show me yours, right? Because I can't work with theoreticals and generalizations around number. I can, but it's not ideal. I want to see the real numbers, like how much is in your bank account today? How much debt do you owe? Where do you need to be in 6 months from now financially? Do you have any major financial concerns you're worried about? Or do we need to be talking to an insurance agent to make sure you've got coverage? Are you worried about retirement, if that's part of where you're at in your life right now? Like, what is it? Let's get real about it and show me where you're at, and show me your debt too, because I want to come up with a plan to pay that as we navigate this journey, right? And so that brings me to another question that was asked, like, oh man, I've got all these goals, and there's this money stuff and yada yada yada. So, but I'm also still an artist, so I can't really afford to pay you. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, you can actually, and part of the task is to figure out how you can, right? And that's really, I think, a mindset shift that needs to occur with a lot of artists too. It's just like, well, you can't with that attitude, and you can't with that mindset. But you can if we talk about it and actually work it out through a spreadsheet and figure out what makes sense. And yeah, the truth is, with some of my clients, they don't pay me much of anything to start out the relationship. But as we build it over time, we increase the compensation of me, and because their compensation is going up too, and we talk about commission structures and how we could leverage commissions as a way to pay for my time and services. So if you're, I have a working range that I present to my prospective clients, and it's different for individual artists than it is for arts organizations. And you can get a sense of that range if you look at my website, 10kCreators.com. But really, don't let price be the sort of motivating factor, because the truth is, part of what, first of all, my services are very affordable, and part of what's stopping most people from moving forward is because they look at this kind of a service opportunity and say, oh, well, I just can't afford it, so I'm not even going to try. Well, some people will say no, and maybe I should say no a few more times than I do, to be fair. But I'm open to discussing it and exploring the possibilities, as long as you are too, and we're in this together, right? And so don't let cost be a factor. If you think you need my services and want my support, let's get together, let's talk about it. I also do barters in addition to commissions, and negotiate the rate scale and the level of commitment and all that stuff. It's a co-created conversation around how we can invest in your work and my work together as we continue to grow and help artists thrive, right? Because that's really what this is all about. Okay, so that's where I'm at today. I hope that gives you a pretty decent sense of, what I spend my time doing, how I talk to people, what kind of clients I work with. There's no sort of one size fits all at the end of the day. But I will say this, at least with my individual artists, not so much with my organizations. For the individual artists, the one thing I will say is that no matter what, the first conversation we really need to have once you become a client is around your goals, around where you're at with your finances, and we need to spend some time fleshing out what your vision is and what that looks like over the next few months. Because what I like to do with all of my self-producing artist clients when we start is an accountability sprint. I want to see what it looks like to hold you accountable to the things we know you need to do in order to achieve your goals, right? And those first 45 to 90 days are critical in helping me to understand how to effectively communicate with you, how to hold you accountable when you drop the ball, what kind of support I can provide you that we haven't talked about, and who in my network I can connect you to, and what kind of opportunities we can bring to the table as I witness how you show up in our relationship in that initial phase. Then from there, it's off to the races. We're working together. We're building that partnership. If it's an arts organization, it's a little bit more complex. I do tend to do somewhat of an audit and have a conversation with the executive team around goals. I do want to see some actual numbers from a QuickBooks file or whatever accounting system you're using. And anyways, that's a whole other story. But all right, so I hope that gives you a sense of what it's like to work with me. I think I've said everything I want to say, so have a beautiful day. All right, bye, y'all.